Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Most Merciful, to all of our viewers out there, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and thank you for joining us again in the intersection of faith and reason, where our guest is Dr. Sh.Yassir Sheikh Idris. Dr. Ja'far, it's good to be with you again, sir, and thank you for joining us. Last time we spoke about the attributes of God. You mentioned that there are two sources of knowing about God: creation and revelation. And you said that through rational deduction we can get to know some of the attributes of God. At this point, we would like to ask, what is the nature of these attributes of God?
Yes, this is a very important question, because it was in answer to this question that Muslims, and in fact also non-Muslims, were divided into about three groups. The question arose because we are familiar with physical or material things. And we know what it means to say that a human being speaks, or an animal walks, so we are familiar with these attributes. The question was, is it necessary for something that exists to be like this existence? And there were, in answer to this question, people, as I said, was divided into three groups. The first group said yes, it has to be. Nothing can exist if it is not like this existence.
Like our own existence.
Yeah, yes. Existence of human beings, of animals, of mountains, of animate and inanimate. And therefore, the nature of God and His attributes must be like these.
Why are they making this? Why are they equating these two here? Why are they making this that God must exist in this way?
Because they think this is the only way for something to exist. And so they thought of God as being just like a human being, but very huge. And these the groups are called anthropomorphists, because they liken the Creator to human beings. There were some people like this, even in Islamic history, but they were a very minor group that had no effect, and they were condemned as idol worshippers.
So to them, God is not different in kind.
No. He's just like a human being, but very huge, big human being. The second group said, it is not necessary for something to exist to be like physical things. And God exists. He's not like physical things. But strangely enough, they said, especially the extremists among them, the attributes that we are familiar with, like hearing, sight, speaking, having eyes, having these are attributes of physical things. And since God is not physical, He cannot be
having these attributes.
Yes, so they went to the other extreme. He cannot be like this. His attributes cannot be like, He cannot have the same, we cannot speak about Him
the same way
as we speak about this. The third group...
I'm sorry, Sheikh. In that case, what are they proposing then?
I will come to that.
Okay. That would be interesting to know.
Yes, these are the third group, which is described as being, in fact, the group of the mainstream Islam in early days. The group of that includes the Prophet and the companions of the Prophet and the three generations of Islam and so on. The answer of this group was that, again, it is not necessary for something to exist to be physical. God exists. He has real attributes. It is this that distinguishes them from the second group. He has real attributes. But because nothing is like Him, Also, his attributes are not like the attributes of created things. These are the three. We forget about the first one because, as I said, they were condemned as being idol worshippers. The second group is divided into so many subgroups. The extremists among them would not even say about God that he exists.
Out of fear that they're speaking to him in a language that they speak about other things.
Yes.
Interesting.
So they were asked, what is he then?
Because they can only speak as to what he is not.
And this group was, and unfortunately, very influential. I read in Asad's introduction to his translation of the Quran.
Muhammad Asad.
Yes, he said something like this. We can only say about God what he is not. We cannot say what he is.
Interesting.
Now, the third group, which criticized them, said, now you try to avoid likening God to created things, and you ended up likening him to nothing, to things that don't exist. Because if something doesn't exist, I can say every negative thing about him, what he is not.
Sure.
I can say if something doesn't exist, I can say it is not tall, it is not short, it is not black, it is not white, it is not up, it is not down, it is not so. And so you ended up likening God to nothing. And that's why they said about the two groups that the first group are worshipping a sanam, an idol, and the second group are worshipping a adam, nothingness. Nothingness. So these are the main groups into which people were divided. Now, the second group, and apart from the extremists among them, was very influential. In fact, perhaps one can say now that, in fact, most believers, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims, most people belong to the second group because they thought that this group was the only alternative to the first group. Very few people know about the third group, which was the group that represented Islam. Now, the second group, of course, the first group, as I said, they were told that you are not worshipping anything. You are talking about nothing.
Adam.
No. But some of the Ahl Sunnah were very fair. They said we have to distinguish between their theories and their reality. Because these people are Muslims, we see them praying and so on. It is impossible for someone to pray to something about which he can't say anything. So it must be that when they pray, they have in mind what we have in mind. But when they come to theorize about this, they say this foolish thing. Now, the less extremist among them said, yes, we can say that God exists because some of the attributes are peculiar to material things, but others are not. So we can say about God that he knows, that he exists. That's what we cannot say, that he sees or hears or loves or hates, also because these are attributes of human beings.
I'm sorry, but how do they explain then when the Quran describes God?
Yes, well, this was the argument of the Ahl Sunnah. They said their answer was that God is speaking to us in a human language because this is the only language that we can understand. But what he says about himself should not be taken literally. When he says that he sees, this means that he knows. This is God is speaking only metaphorically. The reply of the Ahl Sunnah, the people of the third group, was when you say he doesn't love, because you should not take love literally, because God's cannot be loving. He knows. No, they asked him, is his knowledge the same as knowledge of created things?
No. Hopefully that's what they said.
Yes, they said no. He knows, but his knowledge. They said, okay, apply this to other attributes.
His love is not like his
love.
Seeing and his hearing, and go on with that.
Yes, because he knows, but his knowledge, he is all-knowing, he knows everything. But created things, the knowledge of created things is limited. So even Al-Ghazali said in his in the first, I think, chapter of his book Ihya Ulumuddin, he criticized this argument, and he said this will lead to an infinite regress, because if I say God sees, you say no, you have to take this metaphorically. Seeing means knowing. But what is knowing? Is it the same as the knowing of human? You say this, no. This should be taken metaphorically. And so on, and so on. He said there is no end to this. So if you end up saying that this attribute, when it applies to God, that does not apply to him in the same way as it applies to human beings, then why go to that extent? Why don't you say with the same thing with every attribute
that he has said about himself?
Yes.
In there.
Then these people of the third group said something very interesting, and I benefit from that. They said that attributes of things are attributes of, can be divided into attributes that are important for something that exists. Every existent must have these attributes, irrespective of the nature of the thing. There are attributes of living things, and so on. So if you say that God can be, if you say that physical things can be observed, they say, yes, this is because they exist out there.
Sure.
Out there. And the same thing must apply to every existent.
Which would include
God
in
yes.
that case.
You cannot say that there is something exists outside my mind, but there is no way at all of observing it as either directly or by some of its effects. This is an attribute of non-existence.
Gotcha. Sheikh, please do hold on that thought. We will continue this conversation when we come back, so please stay tuned.
The main concepts of Islamic economics, how is it different from the Western theories?
And the beauty about Islam is not that it just came as a religion to perfect the relationship of the servant of Allah with Allah, but also it came to perfect the relationship of the servant of Allah with others. The beauty about Islam comes and brings the interest of the public and the interest of the individual together.
How is Islamic banking different from the traditional banking system?
The concept of riba is that I lend you money, I give you a loan, in return that you give me back that loan with an extra at the top.
The idea of the stock market itself is halal or haram.
So these are the main conditions that the scholars put with regards of the share market.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back again. We're talking with our guest, Dr. Sh.Yassir Sheikh Idris. Dr. Jafar, we're talking about the attributes of God and their nature. And just in case you're joining us right now, and to also give a summary of what we've spoken about, you said that there were three views with regard to the nature of the attributes of God. You said that there was a group that negated everything, or I'm sorry, the first group that you called anthropomorphists.
Anthropomorphists.
I think that's the longest English word that I know. And these are people that say that God is not different in kind, but He's only different in size.
Yes.
But He is like us in everything. And he said that
because they wanted to affirm, they thought that this is the only way to affirm what is said in the Quran about God. Because the Quran says God exists. It says that He sees, He hears,
as we do.
He speaks. So they said the only way for something to have these attributes is that it must be like us. No.
And as such, they came to that conclusion.
No.
And then you said there was the other extreme that chose to speak about God, but only in negative definitions.
Yes.
They can only say what He is not.
Yes, because these, the first group emphasized the fact that God exists. The second group wanted to emphasize the fact that He is not like, nothing is like Him. So if nothing is like Him, He cannot have any of the attributes, we cannot speak about Him in terms of any of the attributes that we apply to existence.
To existence.
No.
And what they would do is that they would explain away, or they would deem these attributes as metaphorical.
Yes.
So do not take them in their literal
these
sense.
are the moderate ones.
Right.
The first group will not say anything about Him. And by the way, I know someone, before I studied this, I was in London, and I met someone who was a good Muslim. He comes to the Friday prayer and so on. He was from some of these Asian countries, and he knew nothing about these groups. But he was very much influenced by some Western philosophers and so on. And he used to tell me, and I used to say to him, brother so and so, then what are you talking about? Who are you worshipping? He doesn't even say that God exists. I mean,
afraid of likening God to creation.
To creation.
Interesting. And that would be the extreme group within this.
Of course, there is a contradiction in this. When you say that when you deny this, you must be having an idea in your mind.
Sure.
Because you cannot say, I cannot say anything about Him, and at the same time say that He is not like, because if He is not like existence, then He must have a certain identity, certain nature that you have in mind. No.
And then the third group that was critical of both of these groups came in, that you called Ahl Sunnah.
Yes.
Yes.
The Arabic names for them is that the first are called, these anthropomorphists called Mushabbiha.
Mushabbiha, because they like
Mujassima. Yeah, they speak of God as something physical. And the second group is called the negators. Mu'attila. The third group is called the affirmers. Musbita. They affirm whatever God said about Himself in the Quran.
In the Quran or in this revelation. And you were talking about how critical they were of both of these
because
groups.
this was the mainstream, as I said. Because this was how people at the time of the Prophet and until the third generation understood the Quran. They never said that these attributes, they took them seriously. Just like ordinary people now, when you tell them that God speaks, or so. They don't think of him as having a mouth like
we do.
our mouth or so. It is natural. Yeah, this is the natural belief. But when this is spread, the people who defended the original position had to level these kinds of criticisms against these deviant groups.
Sheikh, what I'm thinking is with the second group, the negators, because you said that they were people that were worshipping God.
Yes.
I am thinking that they were so keen, like you said, in reaction to the first group.
Yes, yes.
But they must have been worshipping God
Yes.
out there.
Yes.
And I don't mean to reduce this to be a nominal argument, but I can see that what they're saying is that we want to speak about God in a matter and in a manner that is befitting to His Majesty.
Yes.
And we do not have the and we do not have the proper words to speak about Him, otherwise we will end up falling into likening Him to His
Yes, and
creation.
that's why some people of the third group treated them with some tolerance. Because they said that their motive is good, but the conclusion is wrong. And some of these people, some of the Mu'tazilites were like this, but the Mu'tazilites were the people who tried to stand against the philosophers. They tried to use rational arguments to defend religion and so on. So they had some very good qualities. And they were condemned as, not condemned as being non-Muslims or anything like that. And the Ubbad, the people who were known to be very pious among them, this is what the Ahl Sunnah said about them, that when you worship God, you cannot worship Him while maintaining these kinds of ideas in your mind.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Sheikh, years ago, I remember in one of the classes, you taught us that sometimes having an erroneous, not image, but having an erroneous concept of who God is has led to the spread of atheism.
Yes.
And I wonder if...
Yes. And I very much believe in this. And I think that it is the people of the third group who criticized people of the second group that saved us from this. Because if you say that there is a being, he is the creator, but I cannot say anything about him. In fact, you are not God for the person who hears this becomes just a word.
Sure.
And it is very easy to move from this to atheism. And many of the atheists in the West give this as a reason, that God is something, according to the believers, is something abstract. And they are not talking about anything that really exists. So they can very easily move from this to atheism. We were saved from this because of the intellectual efforts of people who defended the third alternative.
I am just trying to imagine how somebody would have a relationship with God, that you would actually be praying to God, hoping that God is listening to you. And I know listening to be the listening that I know as a human being. Now, I'm not likening God to man, but that's what I know when I am thinking listening.
Yes, but there were very intricate problems. And when you read the details of the replies of Ahl Sunnah, you admire their intellectuality. They told them that these words that we use to describe physical things, I don't know whether they said all of them, but they said a descriptive word has an abstract meaning. That meaning takes a form according to the thing described. And they said that this applies even to created things. When you say a human being has an eye, a donkey has an eye, a fish has an eye, there is something common here. That is the abstract meaning. But the form the eyes take is different. When you say that Sheikh bin Baz is a alim, a learned person, Einstein is a learned person, a alim, you are using the word correctly. But the form that this attribute takes depends on
The thing that it's being applied.
And so they say the same applies to the Creator. We say He knows, He is living, He hears, but we are using the words correctly. And there is something that is common. This abstract meaning is common between common to between us and God. But then the form that these attributes take when they apply to God is different from what they apply to God.
And now I see how this is the middle position between these two groups.
No, this is the position of the third group.
Yeah, where one went to the extreme saying that we do apply the forms unlike the negators, but we do not liken it unlike the...
Yes, and this is, you know, the famous saying of Imam Malik, and in fact it is said that someone said it even before Imam Malik, one of the companions of the Prophet, when he was asked about istiwa to be above the throne. What does it mean? He said, al-istiwa'u ma'loom, and we know the meaning of istiwa. Al-kayfu majhul, the how of it,
the modality of
yes, the how of it is not known to us. Now, if you don't know, for example, you never saw Mr. Putin. Suppose you never saw him. But someone said, Mr. Putin is now sitting on a chair. You can't imagine how he sits, because you liken him to human beings, and you know how a human being sits, so you can have an idea of the form of his sitting. But you can't have an idea of the form of the attributes of the Creator, because he is not like anything else. So you cannot liken him to anything and say he speaks in this way, or his love of his mercy takes this or that form.
Sure. Sheikh, I do have some few more questions about this topic specifically. Usually the way it's introduced to us, it's very rigid and somewhat. But we would like to visit this topic again, and we will do this the next time we meet, inshallah. Thank you for joining us today, and hope that you will join us as well next time. Until then, we say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and so on.